I have to tell you that I'm nearly sure that in the months ahead, we will look back on this recent new moon in the late degrees of Scorpio as a critical turning point in the downtrend, if not the unraveling, of Trump and the Trump administration. Of course, astrologically, this makes a lot of sense because it's a very, very loaded new moon when you have the sun and moon in those degrees already squaring his rising Mars and his ascendant, but then with Mercury retrograde, part of that conjunction, as well as the black moon, and with Uranus on the other side in Taurus opposing, that's a lot of pressure on that Mars. And so it makes perfect sense. Remember that Mars, by some accounts, is the key planet in his entire shtick. You know, the aggression, the all-ahead flank on everything, the intensely selfish and indeed even criminal behavior that he exhibits. You know, not to mention all his martial impulses. I mean, this guy seems to be constantly focusing on, well, is there a way that I can declare an insurrection, that I can declare martial law so I can gain total power? Well, the problem is that the planets are against him, and new moons set a tone at minimum for the upcoming month, which of course puts December in grave doubt based on where that new moon is operating. But my sense is that it goes further than that. When you look at how many planet archetypes are manifesting in the world at present, for example, if we start from the last planet in the array, Eris, it's pretty obvious that when you see figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, even Nancy Mace, although she's kind of a 50-50 thing, but she's in there as well, and then all the Epstein women survivors doing press conferences, essentially shaming Trump and the GOP. This is the revenge of Eris for good reason. These are things that he's done. It's simply the manifestation of karma coming back to haunt you. Is it going to let up? No, it's not going to let up because that planet doesn't leave. Unfortunately for him, fortunately for the rest of us. But then you backtrack one planet. Pluto is in a semi-square, sesqui-square situation to his Gemini planets, as well as the moon in Sagittarius. That's a major irritant that is not going away. Then we go to the next planet, Neptune, and all the corruption that is being exposed, which, you know, people throw their arms up and they say, this guy just basically practices open theft and nothing is being done about it. Well, maybe not yet, but one thing is for sure, it's reflected in the numbers that he's getting back. And his numbers are very poor. And I often say this to people about astrology as well, that before you tell the story, focus on the numbers. The numbers tell you the measurement, how close, how far, how precise. Then you make the story. It's the same in politics. All sorts of stories are swirling around constantly. But the numbers tell you what is happening, as do the voting numbers that took place not too long ago. That's where the public really is. When all is said and done, if you hear, oh, Democrats, they're not getting anything done, they're weak, maybe, but that's not what the result was. The numbers tell a different tale. And this corruption is eroding his support. And not just from the big number of Democrats, which are always in the 50 to 55% level. You see numbers in the 60s and the 70s, because a big part of his base is against the elites. No, they're not rich, a big part of his base. And so Neptune is showing up in his life in that way, and it's because Neptune is not well placed in his chart. Uranus, I already covered it as part of that new moon. Uranus, the way he's corrupting it is through the self-dealing. In every instance, he's looking for ways to enrich himself. And this is the shadow of Uranus, where Uranus is meant to be, in a sense, the most democratic planet by empowering the individual as well as the group, which of course is very difficult. We all know that, but what can you say about that other than to say that this was Churchill's famous statement about how democracy is a horrible way to govern, except for all the other systems, which are in fact even worse. But he's corrupting the Uranus, and the Uranus is coming back to haunt him by exposing the self-dealing. Then you get to Saturn. That's a pretty obvious one as well, in that, as I've said numerous times, that planet is currently in a bad place for him, and it's going to be even worse next year. Something that occurred to me as well is that when you label things in a way that, in a sense, invoke the archetype, it can turn against you. And it's curious that a big part of his government initiative or way of governing is through the immigration enforcement that he is trying to accomplish, which prior to the 2024 election was said to be one of his strengths, but now he is very, very unpopular as a result of it. And if you think of the term ice, ice is Saturn. Saturn doesn't rule flowing water, but it rules water in its frozen state. Ice, literally. So you're, in a very real sense, invoking the archetype against yourself. This can only get worse next year because as Saturn makes its way into Aries and stays there until 2028, it's in his legal house, the ninth. And it's why you're already starting to see more and more legal reversals, things that are not working for him. For example, in the Texas redistricting, they thought they had it in the bag, and now a court is pushing back. It's possible the Supreme Court will let him have it, but it's not certain. The tariffs, which the Supreme Court seems set to push back on, and even if he finds a way around it through other means to still impose these levies and taxes, it's going to be another setback. Then you have recent case, he tried to sue CNN. It was dismissed. You have judges opposing him on the Venezuela initiatives, blowing up boats. That's also being pushed back. Then you have the farcical situation with the Comey case and the total incompetence that they're exhibiting around that, almost certain to be pushed back on as well. So on multiple levels, you see how this area, the legal area, is becoming a problem. But a further problem he has is that the immigration issue is in the same house. Right? And the last planet you want going there is Saturn. And the last thing you want to do is invoke something that literally reflects the nature of the planet, and then it comes back to haunt you. And then Jupiter, which should be helping him. I mean, if Jupiter on your Venus, when something happens in your chart, Jupiter conjoining Venus is concurrent with being exposed around the Epstein issue. That Jupiter is not really helping you out. I mean, in some measure, you could say perhaps it's protecting him by way of the fact that in the short term, they can say, well, this thing is under investigation now, we're on it, we'll let you know, and they can keep stalling. I'm going to guess that the longest they can stall on this is into the beginning of the year when the ERA station happens, mid-January, because of the fact that further things will probably show up and incite the public to put more pressure, probably judges to get involved. Again, it's a total loser. So bottom line, back to what I said at the beginning, this period with the new moon I think we will look back and say that's when it all began to unravel. But if you're looking for entertainment in the near term, you don't have to wait too long because, as I said, new moons also point to the next month. And if the start is problematic, then it shows up over the next 30 days. So put on your seatbelt because December is probably going to be very interesting.